Okay, good. Thank you, Eric. I was in England last year. You are my sending church, and you sent me there. And I worked with another church in Hampshire, in a village called Gretham, and also in Lawbury Fellowship for a week. It was an intense week, but I think very profitable. And thank you for your prayers and your support for this work. I would ask you also for prayer because I'm getting ready to go to Perm in Siberia in September. And the preparations have been difficult, technically and with circumstances, but also there has been some spiritual attack, and I have been depressed. And I read these difficulties as a sign that the trip is going to be very worthwhile, and that there's an attack against the trip. And so I'm encouraged, but I feel bad. So thank you for your prayers. I would appreciate it very much. Paul is writing to Titus, who is on the island of Crete and has been left there to organize the churches and to appoint elders to lead and give structure to the churches, so it's not just chaos and everybody doing whatever they think they want to do all the time. And he's been describing the qualifications of the elders and the job of the elders. And at the end of the passage last time, he said that the job of the elders is to encourage the people because they know well the gospel, and to protect the people from error, from false doctrine, from evil, from outside the church and from inside the church. That's the background. Then we begin in verse 10 of Titus chapter 1, and he says, because, therefore. And whenever you see therefore, you want to know what it's there for. So I'm telling you what comes before so you know what the therefore follows. For there are many rebellious people, unruly people. People who don't look for the stable order that the gospel of Jesus Christ gives us for our lives in community, but who use their own imagination and their own desires to produce an order for themselves, which might change from time to time, according to their mood or according to their circumstances. They are unruly in terms of the gospel of Jesus Christ, but they are very ruly in terms of their own idea of a rule or an order of life. Many rebellious people, mere talkers and deceivers. They just talk. Blah, blah, blah. And they have all sorts of disconnected ideas and all sorts of agendas that they want people to believe and to follow them. But they're not consistent in walking the path of Jesus Christ. In America, we have an expression that says, walk the talk. Sometimes people know the gospel and they talk about the gospel accurately, but they don't live. And the Christian way of living in the New Testament, in the first generation, was called the way or the walk. How you walk through your life is the Christian way of walking through your life. It's not about what you know. It's about what you believe and trust and what makes a difference in your life and in your relationships. If the talk is wrong and just fantasy and my own imagination, I make a huge mistake if I do walk the talk, but probably I won't be able to walk the talk because the talk is confused and disconnected. So these people that Paul is talking about are mere talkers and deceivers because they don't have the truth. They don't talk about the truth. Especially those of the circumcision group. Paul had many struggles in Galatia, in Corinth, in Jerusalem, with Jewish people who had become Christians and who believed that in order to be a Christian, you have to be Jewish. So you need to be circumcised, among other things, among other observances and rituals of Judaism, in order to be Christian. That you have to keep the law and then add Jesus Christ to the law. Paul had struggled in various places, and in Crete there was the same kind of struggle. Now, it wasn't only the circumcision group. And in our circumstances, here in Switzerland, in many of the countries that you come from, there is no problem in the churches with the circumcision group. You probably never heard of the circumcision group. They're just not a problem for you in your churches. But there are other groups that are very active in our day and in our cultures, like the prosperity theology group, the health and wealth teaching groups, the name it and claim it groups that promise you, if you give money to our organization, you will be healthy and wealthy. This is very disturbing. It divides whole families and communities. It gives false promises. It makes people depressed and discouraged when the promises are not met. This is the kind of thing that Paul is talking about that we meet in our own day. Or we can think of the escape theology, that the purpose of the Christian life is for God to take us away to a better place. And so we don't need to worry about how we live. We don't need to take care of the planet. We don't need to be careful about the agriculture and the ecology. Never mind. God is going to burn it up and throw it away. And we're all going to go and be someplace else with Jesus that is a beautiful place. This makes people think that God is brown. But God is not brown. He's green. No one is greener than God. We have the Green Party and the Greenpeace movement, but no one is greener than God. He made all the green, and He loves the green, and He put people on the earth to take care of the green. But there are Christians in the last 150 years who have taught the green doesn't matter. We're going someplace else. Let it turn brown. Just save your soul in some kind of supernatural connection. You see, that is a very dangerous group. And that is the kind of group that some of you have had contact with. So this is to bring it up to date. To just say the circumcision group, well, you all relax. Well, I don't have a problem with the circumcision group. Fine. But you do have contact with other groups that are very unhelpful. And the circumcision group was not only circumcision, it was about food and ritual and religious practices. Then in verse 11, he's very strong. He says, they must be silenced because they are ruining whole households. They're dividing households. They're converting some people to their way of thinking, and other people are not converted. And the households are becoming divided and separating and arguing with each other. They're ruining whole households by teaching things they ought not to teach. Like, if you become a Christian, you will always be healthy, and everyone in your family will be healthy. No one should teach that. The Bible does not teach that. But people do teach that. They ought not to teach that. So there were things going on in the first generation of the church that should not be taught. And that's what Paul is talking about. And that for the sake of dishonest gain. So they were getting money by telling the secrets, by making the initiation into the power of health and influence. They were getting people to pay them money to do these things. But now we have Christians whose basic central idea is the offering plate and fundraising. This is the whole thrust of their ministry, is to raise money. And we get the idea that if you give money, you're saved and you're right with God. Now, there's nothing wrong with give money. Give money to this church, and not only this church, give money to various good works that are in the world. You should be giving money, but giving money doesn't save you. Jesus Christ saves you. You don't give money to be saved. You give money because you are saved. It gets reversed. Give more money and you'll be more saved. No, you won't. Be saved and your heart will be softened and you will want to help. That's the way it works, not the other way around. So these people were teaching very dangerous misunderstandings of the gospel, and they were making money at it. Not all of them. Verse 12. Even one of their own prophets has said, Cretans are always liars, evil brutes, lazy gluttons. Okay? That's not a very good description of a culture and a nation and a people group. Cretans are always liars, evil brutes, lazy gluttons. Now this was said by Epimenides 600 years before. And Epimenides was a poet and a prophet who saw lots of things and was very influenced. And people quoted him, very famous writers quoted him in the Greek culture. And then Paul says in verse 13, this testimony is true. Now that sounds like he's just endorsing Epimenides and saying, yes, all the Cretans are like that, they're horrible people. In part, that is true, but there's a very subtle thing going on here that I would like to point out to you. The Greek culture is famous for its philosophy, Greek philosophy, and they developed various logical ways of thinking and exercises for thinking. And one of them is the syllogism, which has a major premise, a minor premise, and a conclusion. And the classic syllogism is, all men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Socrates is mortal. You see, that's logical. You have the major premise beginning with all, and then the minor premise, which is a specific, and then a conclusion, that we know Socrates is mortal because he is a man, and all men are mortal. Now, listen to this syllogism. All Cretans are liars. Epimenides is a Cretan. What is the conclusion? Epimenides is a liar. So the one who said all Cretans are liars is a liar. So maybe not all Cretans are liars. And Paul is trying to say, wake up, Titus. Stay awake, take a good look, don't take anything for granted. Don't always think everyone is telling the truth, because not everybody does. Don't always think everybody is lying, because not everybody lies. It's like the joke with the postcard. On one side of the postcard it says, the statement on the other side of this card is true. And you turn the card over and it says, the statement on the other side of this card is false. Where do you go? You're just paralyzed logically with that. You can't go anywhere. Well, Paul is saying you can't go anywhere with this. All Cretans are liars, says a Cretan. And so he makes this really a tongue-in-cheek, ironic statement, and this testimony is true. Even though Epimenides was obviously a liar in his own opinion, because he was a Cretan. So Paul is saying life is confusing and you have to be awake for the culture that you're in. Titus was Greek, but he was not Cretan. He was away from home in another culture, and Paul is telling him to be awake. Some of you have traveled as missionaries. Some of you are with YWAM. You go on an outreach. This is traveling as a missionary. You need to be aware when you go to a culture that is not your own, that it's different. Okay? In September, I'm going to Russia. I'm going to Siberia to teach for a week. Russians are not Americans. I'm an American. If I teach Russians like I would teach Americans, they won't learn. I know because I've tried it more than once. And they don't learn. It was a horribly frustrating experience for me. In America, when you want to teach people and they're in a classroom, you walk into the classroom and you say, "Good morning, nice to be with you. My first point is," and you write it on the board, and you get going. In Russia, you go in and you have a classroom of people. You have to spend at least one day drinking tea and chatting. Because the Russian culture is based on relationships, not on fact. And if they don't relate to you, if they don't know you as a human being, as a mensch, if they don't sit with you and drink tea and talk about your childhood and old times and where are you from and what do you eat for Christmas and these kinds of things, none of the facts that you tell them will register. Because they don't have any basis to trust you. But if you sit with them and drink tea and eat cookies and chocolate for a whole day, on Monday, on Tuesday, they will learn from you. If you don't do that, you teach Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and maybe Friday they will start learning from you. It's too late. So you save time by wasting time. If you waste the whole Monday, just blah, 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 lounge around, go for a walk, drink tea, smile, schmooze, interactive schmoozing, then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday will be productive teaching days. Americans are not like that. I don't think Koreans are like that either. That's not my experience of Koreans. But people are different. And so Paul is telling Titus, the Cretans are their own culture. You have to know them in order to love them. You can't assume that they're like you and have the same values and the same procedures. Now, we're an international church, and we're more aware of that than your average church, which just has all of one race and all of one language together. This testimony is true. Therefore, rebuke them sharply. So tell them strongly, privately and publicly, you are teaching wrong, you should not do this. Be very, very clear and confronting about this. What is the purpose of the sharp rebuke? So that they will be sound in the faith. The purpose of the sharp rebuke is not to get rid of these people. It is to bless these people, which is a whole different agenda. It's similar to forgiveness. There is a lot of teaching around that forgiveness is therapeutic. If you have a tension, a conflict with something, you forgive that person so that you can end the negative connection and be in better health. That is not the purpose of forgiveness. We don't want Jesus to forgive us so that he can end his connection with us. We want him to forgive us so we can be with him. That's what forgiveness is for restoration, not for excuse and now I don't have to bother with you anymore. And so the purpose of Titus rebuking these people is so that the people can be with him and together in a true knowledge of the faith of Jesus Christ. That is the motivation. That is the purpose. Rebuke them sharply so that they will be sound in the faith and will pay no attention to Jewish myths or to the commands of those who reject the truth. So the Jewish myths are, you have to be pure by being circumcised, washing your hands in a silver dish before you eat, wearing certain kinds of clothes, avoiding certain kinds of foods, having a certain schedule of the week. All of things will make you right with God. All of those things will make you pure. You will be pure if you do all of those things and live within those regulations. And Paul calls them myths. Now, the Torah, the Old Testament, is not myth. It is God's truth of creation and calling. But Jewish people added many things, little extra rules and ceremonies, because it made them feel like they were doing more for God, various motivations that they had. And then they were teaching this kind of very legalistic, nitpicking lifestyle as a way to purity. Then Paul says in verse 15, to the pure, all things are pure. But to those who are corrupted and do not believe or do not trust in Jesus, nothing is pure. Now he's teaching something that Jesus taught more than once. Just look briefly at a short passage in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 7, verse 14 and 15. Gospel of Mark, chapter 7, verse 14 and 15. Again, Jesus called the crowd to him and said, "Listen to me, everyone, and understand this. Nothing outside a man can make him unclean by going into him. Rather, it is what comes out of a man that makes him unclean." That belongs to what Paul is saying, that to the pure, all things are pure. Then in Luke, chapter 11, verse 42 and 39 to 41. Then the Lord said to him, "Now then, you Pharisees clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness. You foolish people." You see, he rebukes them sharply. "You foolish people. Did not the one who made the outside make the inside also? But give what is inside the dish to the poor, and everything will be clean for you." So what he's talking about is if you have a clean heart. And Paul is talking about this in Romans when he talks about meat sacrificed to idols. If you have a clean heart, everything is clean. You don't have to avoid everything in order to be right with God. You don't have to be afraid of everything in order to be right with God if you have a new heart from Jesus and a right spirit within you. But if you don't have a right spirit, if you don't have a new heart and a clean heart, nothing is clean. Even the good things that you do are not properly motivated or contextualized. So the point is to be alive in Jesus and to trust in Him. And then the various things you do in your life will be pure. He says, in fact, both their minds and their consciences, their logic and their sense of right and wrong are corrupted. Works righteousness produces confusion. They claim to know God because they have all this secret information, but by their actions they deny Him. They don't love their neighbors, they're not generous, they're not kind, they're not forgiving, they're selfish, they cheat people, they get money. They are detestable, disobedient, and unfit for doing anything good. He's talking about people who are not in Christ, moving toward destruction and death, and people who are in Jesus, moving toward life. God has promised a new heart and a right spirit because of what Jesus has done for us in His victory over death and evil on the cross. When we look for these promises as central to our lives, to our Christianity, we will increase in the fruits of the Spirit, which is the true sign that we belong to God. Not that we do legal things or we have habits in our lives, but that we grow in the fruits of the Spirit. Then our theological discussions about detailed things, our decisions about religious and lifestyle activities will have a stabilizing context in love, humility, new life, and truth. Otherwise, everything will be confusion and division. Look always to Jesus and the new life He died to give you. God bless you. Amen.